Hey, everybody. So this year, 34 states will have governor's races, including the great state of California, where I was born and raised. And California is an interesting story of both progression and regression. And there's still so much to appreciate about the state where I was born and raised, in spite of all the ways that it has failed to, quote, meet the moment over these last several years. And so tonight, I want to briefly talk about California's history and showcase some of the actors that are running for governor in 2026 and how the complicated history of California has led it to where it is today. So let's talk. Welcome to another episode of the Holy Politician Podcast. Oh, Cali. It's been through a lot. As a matter of fact, I met somebody today who told me they had never ever been to California, but part of their bucket list and their dream is to get there. And if you've never visited, I would encourage you to do that. It's a beautiful state. We have beaches and mountains. And not too many states can say that. It's so beautiful. The landscaping it's second to none. Driving down Pacific Coast Highway all throughout the state, it's so breathtaking and it's absolutely beautiful. It's a beautiful state and one that many people always long to go to. It's a place really where people have gone for years to pursue their dreams, right? To make it, to make their big break. People went there to mine for gold back in the day, to escape Jim Crow, even, to be as far away from the South as they can get. Black people went there to live a new life. People came to Cali to make it in Hollywood or to make it in tech or just to live by the beach and be beach bums, right? The hippie movement was birthed out of California, including even the Jesus movement, right? And so Cali has been a dream state for decades with songs like California Love or California Dreamin', right? This state is a place where people go to pursue their dreams. Watch this clip.
People came for all kinds of reasons. Some came because of the Bracero program, a guest worker scheme that brought thousands of Mexican laborers to pick crops and work in the state's fields. Black people came looking to escape the segregation and racism of the Deep South and ended up in places like Oakland and Los Angeles. Others came for college. The California Master Plan for Higher Education, developed in 1960, supercharged access to higher degrees and set the seeds for its tech future. Yet others, like the hippies, came because the state became the epicenter of the counterculture of the 1960s, especially San Francisco's Hyde-Asbury neighborhood, a place that had once enjoyed cheap rents and access to some of the best writers of the beat generation of the 1950s.
Wow, did you hear that? Cheap rents in San Francisco. That's not even a sentence that we could say today. We couldn't even imagine or fathom that. The word cheap at all connected to California just doesn't go in the same sentence, right? Now, San Francisco is on the top 10 most expensive cities list in the United States, where the median listing price for a home is something like $860,000. And that's not for like 1,000 square foot home. It's for, it might be for 1,000, meaning it's not for like a 5,000 square foot home. You might get 1,000 square feet. You might get 2,500 square feet. It just depends on where you are in San Francisco. Times have changed. Cheap and California just don't go together anymore, right? And over the past couple of decades, the California dream has turned into somewhat of a nightmare. And so let's set the stage a little bit. Why have things shifted? Well, some blame it on the political landscape of California. California has been experiencing a trifecta in its government for the past 15 years. And I've talked about what a trifecta is before, but just to give you a little bit of background, a trifecta is when the governor's mansion and the state legislature, both the House and the Senate, is dominated by one political party. And in the case of California, it's dominated by Democrats. So you've got the governor's mansion, and then you've got the state assembly, which is the state house, and then you've got the Senate, the state Senate, which all three of these areas form a trifecta. and they're all dominated by Democrats. And so California leadership, if you look at the state Senate, it's 75% Democrat. If you look in the state assembly, it's 75% Democrat. So two out of every three people that are making policy decisions at the state level are Democrats. And so Democrats are the supermajority in the state, which means that all of their policies get passed. So could you imagine being in the minority in California and trying to have any kind of impact at all? It's like you're constantly banging your head against a wall. And this is not kind of unique to California. I live in Florida, and in Florida, there too is a supermajority, but on the flip side, where Republicans form a trifecta. So being a Democrat here, it's almost like, well, wow, can we get anything done that meets our agenda? It's very, very hard to do that. And so when you have a supermajority, that supermajority governs and dictates the policies and the statutes that come out of the state legislature and that the governor signs into law. And so California has experienced 16 years of one party rule. And the results are somewhat disappointing. Let's talk about some of the outcomes of this one party rule over the past, couple of decades. And so what was once a multi-billion dollar surplus in the state is now a multi-billion deficit. And so it's experiencing like a $40 billion deficit in the state right now. And this wasn't always the case. A couple years ago, it was in a surplus, but right now it is experiencing a deficit. And the US as a whole is facing a deficit, right? And that's troubling. In the United States of America, we have $40 trillion in debt. That is not sustainable. It's not sustainable for a household, it's not sustainable for a state, and it's definitely not sustainable for an entire nation to be $40 trillion in debt, right? And so, specifically to California, this is the current financial economic circumstance. And then what was once a homelessness crisis in California has now become a homelessness catastrophe. California has the largest homeless population in the nation. Yeah, it's true that it's the most populous state, but over the years, the homelessness population has increased while the actual number of people who living in California has decreased. A lot of people have exited the state of California, which leads to another one of its issues is that people are leaving the state in record numbers. Businesses are leaving because of corporate tax policy, which basically is precluding corporations from being able to make sense with their resources. I don't know if you knew this, but California went to a $20 minimum wage. And companies can't afford to pay people $20 an hour and still actually make a profit. And so companies are leaving California at the corporate level. Tesla obviously has left, In-N-Out has left, and there are other corporations that have left the state because of corporate taxes. But there also has been a mass exodus of people that are fleeing to other states because of harmful policies that are impacting their livelihood. People just want to be able to live their lives and not be told that their students, if they go to school, are going to be taught things like the multiple spectrum of genders that students can subscribe to. Who wants to send their kid to a school when you're being told that to sit in a classroom, your students have to learn about all of these genders that they can decide to be? I'm not sending my child to a school like that. And during the COVID pandemic, California was on a lockdown for months, and people wanted to be free to go get something to eat, to go to the beach, to go places, to go to church even. But COVID precluded people from being able to live their lives. And so people said, I'm leaving. This is insanity, and I'm leaving the state of California. So there's been a mass exodus of companies and people, which means that tax dollars begin to go away, right? Another problem that they've been facing are crime rates started to go through the roof, and people were basically not doing a whole lot about it. And so when you allow there to be crime that is not controlled, then that's a problem, and policy needs to be changed on account of that. And so instead of things getting better in California, things have gotten progressively worse with progressives in charge. So enter the 2026 governor's race. And there are a lot of characters in the race, 31 to be exact. And so we're not going to get into all of the 31 people that are running for governor because this would be a 31-hour podcast, but we will talk about a few of them in a minute. So in California, the way that they vote for governors is unique. The governor's primary uses a two-top system, which they call a jungle primary, because you've got all these people that are kind of fighting for one race. And so this is how it works. All candidates in a governor's race run on the same ballot, regardless of party affiliation, right? So all voters in the state, regardless if they're independent, if they're Democrat, if they're Republican, if they're non-declared, they all vote for the same candidate. There's not a separate Democratic primary and a second Republican primary like you have in other states. So everybody is thrown on the same ballot and anybody can vote for whoever they want. And so when the primary takes place in June, the top two vote getters are going to advance to the general election in November. And so party doesn't matter. So in the general election, you might have two Democrats on a ballot. You might have two Republicans on the ballot, which would be interesting, right? You might have a Democrat versus a Republican, which would be ideal. That way voters can, choose according to their party affiliation. But that's not the way that it works in the state of California, which is very interesting. And the way that things look now, you might have two people of the same party on that ballot in the general election. And so let's quickly take a look at the candidates that are promising to turn things around in California. And if you were somebody living in the Golden State and you look at the current status of California, to be bold enough to say, I want to be governor in this state, that takes a lot of gall and hopefully a lot of consulting with God, if you are somebody that consults with God, to want to be able to take on the challenge that is California. And so let's look at the Democrats. There are 18 Democratic candidates for governor, right? And so I'm only going to highlight a few. Let's talk about these three. First, you've got the former mayor of Los Angeles, Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa. And many of you remember him as mayor. He was mayor from 2005 to 2013. He had two terms there as mayor, right? And he was seemed to be a pretty popular mayor at the time. He was also a member of the state assembly for 6 years prior to that. And so this is a man that has lots of years as a politician. It's been a long time since he actually has been a politician, and he's aged quite tremendously between from 2013 to now. But he's running for governor in the state of California. You've also got former Congresswoman Katie Porter. You might remember her because she was often highlighted on TikTok reels and on Instagram reels because she always used these most creative charts and graphs. And she was like a teacher in a classroom, illustrating her points and really basically reading people their rights when she was in Congress. Katie Porter was pretty well known for her time when she was in Congress. And then you've got former U.S. Health and Human Services Secretary Xavier Becerra, former Attorney General of California as well. He was also a former member of the House of Representatives and Congress and a former member of the California State Assembly. This man is what you call a career politician, and he wants to keep politicking as the next governor of the state of California. So these are a few of the top contenders on the Democratic side for California governor in 2026. Now let's turn over to the Republicans. There are 13 Republican candidates running for governor in California. Not as many as Democrats, but still, that's a long list to choose from. Let's talk about these two. Chad Bianco, who is the current Riverside County Sheriff, which is an elected office in the state of California. So the people that live in Riverside County voted to have Chad Bianco be their state sheriff, not once, but twice. He was first elected in 2018, and then he won election again in 2022. And he made headlines as well for fighting the state and the governor when COVID hit and refusing to enforce vaccine requirements on his deputies. He refused to do it. He said, I will not force them to get COVID vaccines. And he also just refused to comply with a lot of the COVID shenanigans that were taking place in the state of California. He is very conservative and he's not putting up with a lot of the mandates that really are not backed by any kind of research. They're not backed by any kind of evidence or data, and he refused to comply. When churches were being shut down, he refused to comply with shutting down churches. So that's Chad Bianco, and he became very popular in the state of California among conservatives, but also among Democrats on the low that have come to him in private and said, "We support what you're doing. We're too scared to say that we support what you're doing in public, but we support what you're doing in private and we want you to run for governor." How crazy it is that we live in a day and age where Democrats are scared to come to the light and say that they support common sense policies. It's just insane that it's so hard to speak up for truth in today's day and age because one party is going to blacklist you or because you're scared of losing your power and your control, but you're going to go behind the scenes and tell somebody that you support them. That is a scary place to be. Then you've got Steve Hilton, who is actually from the UK. He's only lived in California for less than 2 decades, really a little more than a decade, but he apparently is up in the polls to become the next governor of the state of California. He's a political commentator who used to be on Fox News. He also is a business owner and he is gaining steam in the polls, which is very interesting considering he is not an American. He maybe he has this, obviously he has his citizenship now, but he is not from America, and yet he's all of a sudden soaring in the polls to become the next governor, which is interesting since the last Republican governor in California, too, was not somebody who was born in America, Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's the last Republican governor in California. So there's something about Californians liking people that are not from America, but coming to America and trusting their voice. I don't know. So, with this many people in the race, 31 to be exact, how does one focus their attention on any specific candidate? Well, naturally, the people with the most money are going to rise to the top, right? They're going to become the most popular contenders in this race. And right now, there are two top contenders. These two Republicans that I just described, Chad Bianco and Steve Hilton, are leading in the polls, right? You've got the Brit, the one who came here from the UK, who all of a sudden is gaining steam, is at the top of the polls. And then you've got the other man who is a renegade from Utah, the sheriff in Riverside County, is in the top of they're the top two contenders. And so this could these one of these two people could potentially be the next governor in California. And so my thing is, and maybe Californians are seeing this to be true, if something ain't working, you've got to make a change. Because what is the definition of insanity? Exactly, right? Now, no administration can necessarily come in and solve all of these problems that California is facing. But if you are somebody who even has a smidge of discernment or intellect, you would say to yourself, we need to vote for something different so that we can hopefully see something different, right? Just like with the current president in the United States. Now, he may not be the most perfect solution, right, given some of his record, but he has been reversing a lot of the immoral and, yes, even devilish things that we have seen coming out from federal policymakers. And so, as California is heading to the polls in June and in November, let's keep this state in our prayers. Let's keep every state in our prayers and every elected official in our prayers. But let's pray for there to be a true resurrection of the policies that have gotten out of control in that state. Let's pray for more common sense and even for there to be a change in the state legislature where we've seen lots of policies come out that support anti-Christ, immoral things that have taken place, like gender affirming shenanigans that have trickled down into schools and homes all across the state, where parents have essentially lost their rights to raise their own children, where we're requiring teachers to affirm a student's chosen gender, or we're requiring parents that want to be parents but maybe haven't had the privilege, but they said we want to be foster parents, but they are requiring them to affirm the gender of foster children in their home. That's just anti-God. And so let's pray for truth to be restored in California so that the dream that we once knew it to be can maybe, even in a small measure, be returned to that state. California is considered the golden state because gold was discovered there, but also where people can go and pursue their dreams. So let's pray for the great state of California to be made great again. Thank you for watching.